You all know the rules. Your written testimony will be put in the record. We ask you to speak for no more than 5 minutes. And I'll just call out names in the order that we saw you come in. So, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, my classmate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now it's on. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, my 109th Congress classmate. Good to be with you again, Ranking Member McGovern. I appreciate the opportunity to testify this evening on my amendment to the appropriations package before the committee. As the ranking member of the MilCon VA subcommittee, it should be not lost on anyone that we are here on Veterans Day, considering a bill that not only unleashes brutal health care cuts on millions of Americans, but a bill that also underfunds critical Medicare for veterans subjected to toxic exposures. After Republicans have been AWOL for 7 weeks, it's quite a slap in the face to veterans on this of all days. As you all know, the PACT Act is the most significant expansion of veterans' benefits in a generation. It's a sacred promise we've made to them, yet like so many other broken promises, we already see Republicans reneging on our commitment to veterans who put their very lives and health on the line to serve our country. During committee consideration of the MilCon VA bill this summer, I secured bipartisan support for my amendment to restore $51.7 billion in advance funding for the Toxic Exposure Fund, or TEF funding, that was also requested in the President's budget. And let me be clear, despite what some senators are claiming, advance funding the TEF is not a slush fund, nor is it illegal. It does nothing more than provide what we promised toxic exposed veterans who we passed the PACT Act to support, that we would provide certainty that funds will be available when they're needed for veterans subjected to toxic substances. It's a legal mechanism our subcommittee uses to ensure consistent, predictable funding for veterans' medical care. As a glaring and obvious example of why we do this, look no further than the last 42 days, where our Republican colleagues shut down this government because they refused to deal with preventing a healthcare crisis created by them. Once rare, these cruel shutdown games are now all too common. This is, after all, the third one for Trump, and we're not through the first year of his current term. It should go without saying that our brave men and women who have served must never be left exposed to such partisan cruelty and budgetary conflicts. Our bitter political divisions must never stand in the way of veterans being able to continue to receive quality care. The final MilCon VA bill before us today stripped out this funding. While President Trump and Republicans have no problem cutting veterans' medical care to pay for tax breaks for their billionaire donors, I do not share this cold-hearted view. This result was not a finished conference product. It was unilaterally decided in the Senate and sent over to the House. That is why my amendment is simple. It adds back in the TEF advance funding that was agreed to by this chamber mere months ago. Advance funding the Toxic Exposures Fund was in the President's budget and agreed upon by the House. We advance fund health care like the TEF, so there are no gaps in funding as Congress negotiates from one fiscal year to the next. To deny this funding on Veterans Day would, of course, only offer one more symbolic act of Republican cruelty. After all, we're mere days from Thanksgiving, and President Trump still brutally attempts to withhold food assistance from our most vulnerable veterans, children, and seniors. Please make this amendment in order to ensure that the guaranteed seamless funding that we promised veterans in the PACT Act is there. To add insult to injury, for the winter holidays, Republicans in Congress are about to pull on their Grinch masks and snatch health care from millions of families nationwide to start the new year. I know, Chairwoman Fox, you know this quite well. You have 62,000 people in your district who will see their health care costs rise if Republicans let critical ACA tax credits expire. Because of this and the big ugly law that Republicans passed while Americans slept, as many as 38,000 people will actually lose coverage in Chairwoman Fox's district from that cruel act. Yet none of us will be spared. In my district alone, the health care horrors are even more bleak if this bill passes. There are 203,000 people about to be clobbered with huge increases in health care coverage, and 82,000 people that I represent will lose coverage from combined big ugly law and ACA price hike impacts. Tragically, the tear-jerking stories of lost coverage, denied care, delayed diagnoses, and needless deaths will haunt every single member who votes for this bill. It didn't have to be this way, of course. Instead of vacationing for nearly 2 months, House Republicans could have sat down to negotiate a bill that would avoid all this pain. They could have crafted a bill that fulfilled the promise to lower costs that President Trump and all of our Republican colleagues made to voters a year ago. Instead of covering up the Epstein files and fleeing Washington, Speaker Johnson could have held hearings to prevent this healthcare shock to our system. But Donald Trump and Republicans broke their promise to lower costs. And this Republican bill is about to cause tens of millions of Americans to endure huge premium increases that will crush them financially. If we don't restore advanced TEF funding, well, we can add it to the list of broken Republican promises. But this one, of course, will break a pledge we made to veterans on Veterans Day. And while we are breaking our promise to veterans in the PACT Act, we are creating an actual slush fund to line certain senators' pockets with millions of taxpayer dollars. I hope you all will not break that or any other promise we've made tonight or tomorrow. And this bill is not the final word. Mark my words, House Democrats will fight on to lower health care costs. We'll throw our bodies in front of every Republican push to make health care more expensive for tens of millions of Americans. And we'll continue to fight to protect veterans exposed to toxins. Those are promises we made, and we intend to keep them. Above all, we'll make sure every Republican complicit in having this wrecking ball into America's healthcare system are held accountable for the harm they inflict on all of our hardworking families. Thank you for the time. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Wasserman Schultz. Ms. Dexter.
Thank you, Chair Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. I did not spend 20 years taking care of the sickest patients in our community to come to Congress and let their healthcare system be decimated. I came here to fight for my constituents, the people behind every statistic and policy debate, who just want to be able to see a doctor that they can trust, afford their prescriptions, and keep their families healthy and safe. Letting the Affordable Care Act tax credits expire this year means Republicans in this chamber are complicit in forcing tens of thousands of Oregonians I represent to make impossible, deeply offensive choices. One constituent wrote to tell me, quote, I just got notice that my marketplace plan is going up from $568 a month to $1,221 a month next year, an increase of $7,836 a year. Another 62-year-old living in Portland wrote, quote, I received an email from my plan saying my rate without ACA support will go from $139 a month to $1,083 a month starting December 31st. That's an 8-fold increase, and it equals $11,328 per year. Families and seniors in my community cannot afford price hikes like this. They will be forced to make impossible choices between keeping their health insurance and putting food on the table or paying their rent. And as a doctor, I can tell you what will happen. People will go without. They will go uninsured. They will delay care. They will skip medications. They will get much sicker and potentially be financially ruined as a result. That's not speculation. It's what I saw in practice for 2 decades. People suffer in silence until it's too late. And then we all, taxpayers and community members, pay the price. And even in instances when a patient doesn't get sicker, putting insurance out of reach has consequences. When we make healthcare unaffordable, healthy people drop out. They leave behind the sickest. That raises premiums, and we end up in a vicious cycle of rising costs that hurt every American looking to access care. I know firsthand the consequences of inaction, so I'm proud to join my colleagues in introducing an amendment to extend the ACA premium tax credits to ensure health coverage is not put out of reach for more than 111,000 Oregonians who rely on this critical support. And if Republicans' refusal to extend the ACA premium tax credits wasn't bad enough, my community is still reeling from the devastating impacts of Medicaid cuts and trying to understand what they're going to mean in the big, ugly betrayal bill. In the wake of its passage, I heard from a single mother in Parkdale who said, quote, the cost of everything is still rising, and if I lose my benefits, I won't be able to afford my rent, food, or clothes for my children and myself. When I am home in my district talking to Oregonians, this is what I'm hearing time and time again. The cost of living is too damn high. People are doing everything right, working hard, playing by the rules. They're raising kids, starting businesses, going to school, paying taxes, struggling paycheck to paycheck just to get by. and they are still just one bad policy decision from losing it all. I refuse to accept this as our destiny. I choose to believe in the ability of this institution to do better by the people it serves. I implore my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to show courage and not leave behind the working families who are desperate for relief. This is a moment for moral clarity. Do the right thing. First, extend the ACA tax credits. We can and must fix this system, and we cannot abandon our constituents today while we talk about how to make it better. Number two, repeal the harmful provisions of H.R. 1. Commit to giving every family in this country a real chance at achieving the American dream. And before I close, I wanted to thank Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz for her leadership in advancing a critical amendment to restore the $51.7 billion in advance funding for the Toxic Exposures Fund that has been stripped out of this package. For over 7 years, I was honored to care for veterans at the Denver VA, where I walked past a sign each morning that read, "The price of freedom is visible here." As a pulmonologist, I was often the specialist trying to address the breathing challenges of my patients exposed to burn pits, Agent Orange, and other toxins. It is unconscionable to me that today, of all days, Democrats have to fight to ensure our veterans poisoned on the front lines get the benefits and care they deserve. We must ensure all Americans, including and especially our veterans, get the care they need, not just to survive, but to actually thrive. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Randall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to testify on this funding package sent to us from the Senate. I'm glad to be here today, testifying in committee after the Speaker canceled votes and has kept us out of session for 53 days and counting. Americans deserve a government that works as hard as they do. And while some of my colleagues on the other side stayed home, I was here in DC, along with my Democratic colleagues, for much of the past 7 weeks, willing to meet and negotiate with the other side. During this time, I also held virtual town halls with my constituents, where I heard from hurting federal workers who were still encouraging us to keep fighting to make sure we protect everyone's health care. I also heard from hundreds of neighbors who shared their personal experiences with Medicaid, Medicare, and with the ACA, programs my Republican colleagues cut when they called us back from the district to pass the big ugly law. I visited food banks and met with families who were uncertain if they were going to get their SNAP benefits and be able to keep their kids fed. Today, I want to share with you some of the stories that I've heard over the last 42 days. Andrea from Fife told me that losing the ACA credits will impact her family significantly. Andrea makes a bit too much to qualify for Apple Health, Washington's Medicaid program. She's pregnant, and without the ACA credits, she'll be swimming in medical debt from healthcare bills she can't pay. She's the only one who provides for her and her children. It's for Andrea that I'm here today introducing an amendment to permanently extend the ACA credit so that she and millions of others across the country don't have to worry about whether they can afford to take their kids to the doctor or get prenatal care. And let's not forget that this healthcare crisis is not just about the Affordable Care Act. It's one that started unfolding in July when Republicans passed the big ugly law absolutely decimating Medicaid and our rural healthcare systems. Carrie from Hoquiam told me that her son has schizophrenia and has struggled with addiction. Without Medicaid, there's no way he would be able to afford the medication that keeps him sane and out of a mental hospital and alive. Brooke from Port Orchard told me that her dad, who lives with them, needs a host of medications to manage his depression, insomnia, high blood pressure, but without insurance, they cost more than $350 a month. With Apple Health, they're free. It's for Carrie and her son, for Brooke and her dad, that I'm here before the committee today to submit an amendment to undo all of the big ugly law's Medicaid changes. Many of the individuals I spoke with about Medicaid have also shared with me the importance of SNAP to their families. Brittany from Port Orchard told me that Medicaid has helped her and her siblings' children. They rely on their Apple Health coverage, and their health is already suffering this year because of the SNAP cuts and their ability to afford healthy food. We know that without access to nutritious food, families can't stay healthy. It's for Brittany and her family that I'm introducing an amendment to undo the cuts to SNAP from H.R. 1. I represent 27,000 federal workers, and I want to share with you Kevin from Tacoma's story. Kevin was impacted by the most recent reduction in force, a RIF, as we call them here, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. His federal career spanned 18 years with HUD and 2 years with AmeriCorps. He said to me, as you can imagine, I'm sad and frustrated to see that career come to a premature end. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes to fight for my job and return to my career of serving the American public. It's for Kevin that I'm offering an amendment to not just reverse this administration's illegal reductions in force during the shutdown for the duration of this CR, but to prevent this lawless administration from undertaking any more RIFs for the rest of the Trump presidency. Our dedicated civil servants deserve better than to live in constant fear of whether they will receive their next paycheck and whether they will still be employed tomorrow. Madam Chair, on behalf of those 27,000 federal workers, on behalf of the 115,000 SNAP recipients in my district, and on behalf of the millions of Americans across the country who stand to lose their health care, I urge you to make these 4 amendments in order. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Fox, Ranking Member McGovern, and members of the Rules Committee. I'm here to speak in favor of my very important amendment, which is very similar to the amendment introduced by Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries and Whip Catherine Clark to extend the ACA premium tax credits for 3 years. It's an amendment I enthusiastically and strongly support. Right now in Oregon and across the country, costs are up. They're up for housing. Costs are up for groceries, for childcare if you can find it, for utilities, and costs are up for healthcare. And unfortunately, without this amendment, healthcare costs are about to skyrocket for thousands of Oregonians and for millions of Americans. I think about Teresa, who lives in rural Clatsop County, Oregon. She's a small business owner of a wonderful produce and flower farm. I've been there. It's wonderful. Like many small business owners, Teresa purchases her coverage on the Oregon Healthcare Exchange. Because of Republicans' refusal to protect healthcare, her premium will soon be going from $230 a month to $1,077 a month. She doesn't have an extra almost $800 a month. This is unconscionable, it's unacceptable, and it's also unnecessary. Teresa's about to turn 60. She works a tough physical job. Running a small family farm is challenging, even in a strong economy. But she won't be able to afford her premium, but she can't afford to be without health care. One illness or one injury could threaten her health and her livelihood. Teresa could be forced to close her family business, a business that plays an important part of the North Coast economy in Oregon. And Teresa's not alone. Americans across the country are receiving similar letters about dramatic premium increases, forcing them to make impossible decisions. If they keep their coverage, how will they pay for food and housing and childcare? They can't. Continuing the tax credit is what the public overwhelmingly supports. I've been in this room for a bit this evening, and I've heard a lot of conversation about the Kaiser Family Foundation. They found that about 3/4, 74% of all U.S. adults say Congress should extend the enhanced tax credits for people who purchase their insurance through the ACA marketplace. At least half of adults across parties continue to support the extension of the tax credit. More than 9 in 10 Democrats, 3/4 of independents, and half of Republicans. Colleagues, we know that too many Americans are struggling to get by because of high costs. And Madam Chair, you were talking about pandemic. No, we're not suggesting that there's still a pandemic. What we're suggesting is that this president ran for office saying he was going to lower costs. Costs aren't lower. Costs are going up. And with this amendment, the continuing resolution under consideration, this will, without the amendment, the CR will add to their burden. More people will struggle to pay for health care. Many will go without. And that means, as Dr. Dexter explained, they will delay getting critical care. They will end up in emergency rooms. And we know that's worse for health outcomes and it's more expensive. So Teresa and everyone in the United States, they should feel secure, not fearful when they get sick. They deserve better, and we can make things better by adopting this amendment to extend the enhanced premium tax credit for 3 years. Now, I want to note that it's been interesting to listen to the conversation in this room about insurance companies. It's about time somebody was talking about insurance companies profiting. I think it's good that we have that conversation. But in the meantime, until we have a plan to address it, we cannot let these costs go up, and people are getting these costs right now. This is November. It's almost the middle of November. These increases are going into effect very soon. We don't have a plan. You don't have a plan to address that before. So let's increase and continue these credits so that people do not have to pay more. Finally, I do want to mention as well the outrageous get-rich-quick scheme for several Republican senators that was tucked into this bill apparently at the last minute, through which several Republican senators will be getting payouts of millions of dollars. This is truly a corrupt provision that should not be in this bill. And when I think about the feeling that people have now about the government, this is going to do absolutely nothing to encourage people to trust in their lawmakers when a provision like this is put into a bill like this. So I encourage this committee, Madam Chair, to make this amendment in order to continue the provisions of the tax credits for the Affordable Care Act, but also let's work together and find a way to get this ridiculous payola get-rich scheme provision out of this bill. It's not a partisan issue, Madam Chair and Rules Committee members. This is an issue of right and wrong and trust in government. I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Bonamici. Ms. Ansari, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome back from your 8 weeks of taxpayer-funded vacation. It's good to see you, and I hope
I'm going to
that
interrupt you.
Republicans
I'm going to
enjoy-
interrupt you, please.
Please.
I am sick and tired of hearing you all say we had an 8-week vacation.
That's exactly what
I
happened.
worked every day. I don't know about you, but
didn't-
I don't want to
worked
hear
every single
another
day as
soul
well. We all worked
say
every
that.
single day, and that's exactly what happened with Speaker Mike
Recognized,
Johnson.
you're recognized.
I hope that you all enjoyed yourselves while American families looked at their letters from their health insurance companies, terrified that their insurance premiums were going to double or triple while the House was out of session for 53 days. That is unacceptable, Madam Chair. Now, we are back here to vote on a terrible partisan spending bill that will deepen a healthcare crisis that you did create. By first stripping away Medicaid from 15 million people, that is a fact. I'm sorry that you deny that fact, but that is a fact of the matter in the bill. And by refusing now to extend the Affordable Care Act, healthcare premium subsidies that keep coverage affordable for American families. And you also did all of this while engineering the most unprecedented transfer of wealth from the working class and poor Americans to the wealthiest people in this country. That is another fact. The Republican shutdown lasted 41 days. It is the longest shutdown in American history. 41 days of unpaid federal workers and families losing access to food assistance. 41 days of families skipping meals and seniors delaying care because Donald Trump chose to use hunger and healthcare as leverage. The callousness and corruption is astounding. Donald Trump and Speaker Mike Johnson, throughout this entire time, did absolutely nothing. They did not lift a finger to try to negotiate a real solution on any of this. What was Donald Trump doing during this time? I know that he announced plans for his $350 million ballroom funded by billionaires and corporations. I know that he was traveling around the world to Asia. He hosted a huge Great Gatsby party. I don't know if anyone here was invited. The night before, 42 million Americans lost access to SNAP assistance. He is acting like a king while millions of people in this country are suffering. That is unacceptable. And Speaker Mike Johnson, throughout this time, he has not just enabled this corruption, he has actively participated in it. That's why I staked outside of his office last week, to be absolutely clear about what's been happening. Mike Johnson is starving Americans and gutting health care to cover up the Epstein files. And I want to explain exactly why and how he's doing so, because the public deserves to understand it very clearly. Congresswoman-elect Adelita Grijalva, who is from my state of Arizona, would be and will be the 218th signature on the discharge petition. 218 is the number needed to force a vote on the floor, whether the speaker wants one or not. And when Adelita is seated tomorrow, finally, after 49 days since she was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives, Speaker Johnson's going to lose control. Because then every single member of Congress on the Republican side and our side will have to go on the record and answer one very simple question. Do you want to support and protect the release of the Epstein files, or do you want to protect the names of the men who were involved in the crimes? That's the vote that Speaker Johnson has been running from. There's been plenty of reporting that the White House and Speaker Johnson have been actively working throughout this entire period to threaten the 4 Republican members of Congress who are on the discharge petition, to get one of them to come off of that discharge petition, because that is their #1 priority. That's what's been happening. It is a cover-up, and Speaker Johnson must and should be investigated. Now Republicans want to move on as though none of this ever happened. We cannot rush through a funding bill that raises costs and leaves families worse off in the middle of Trump's affordability crisis. So I have amendments at the desk, first to guarantee that the American people are not forced to subsidize Donald Trump's $350 million ballroom, a private palace where his billionaire donors will be rewarded with access and influence. These amendments also require complete transparency on which corporations and ultra-wealthy individuals are financing this project and what they are receiving in return. Second, to ensure that this bill cannot take effect until ACA premium tax credits are renewed, because if and when they expire, premiums will skyrocket and people will lose health care. The corruption and heartlessness of these policies must end. I urge the committee to support these amendments in order for us to have a real debate on protecting American families and on restoring trust in government that Donald Trump is dismantling. I yield back.
Mr. Subramanian, you're recognized.
Subramaniam. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one amendment. That's Amendment 23. This is the Republican payola that we've been talking about. And it's basically to strike this provision out of the bill. And this provision would simply allow so just to take a step back, because we've been talking about it here, but people may be joining in. But basically, Republicans in the Senate put this provision in, 8 or 9 of them, of the Senate Republicans would be given a legal pathway to force taxpayers to pay them millions of dollars over phone record collections during the January 6th investigations. It's a rewards program for Republican senators. And I would walk you through it, but the Republicans on this committee seem to know it well and have walked us through it quite well. It's $500,000 at a minimum per phone line, per offense. This could go up to $50 million per Republican senator, if you think about it. And it limits the government's ability to defend itself and defend these claims on behalf of the taxpayers. And so you're basically having these Republican senators being able to make these legal claims, and then the government can't even defend itself. It's just going to be rewarding these senators with cash, 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 cash. How is that not corrupt? And this is in the middle of an affordability crisis. $50 million, that's 1,000 times the average annual salary of a person in this country. Think about that. 1,000 times the average annual salary. For Democrat versus Republican, this completely undermines this entire institution and everything about it. This is why people hate Congress, is because they think we're all corrupt because stuff like this happens. And I've heard Republicans on this committee say that they agree that it's wrong. They agree that this is a wrong thing and that we'll fix it later. Well, you have the chance to fix it right now, and this is really the only chance to fix it right now. Because the reality is, the only way to right this wrong is to strip this bill of this amendment right now and send it back to the Senate and force them to vote on the bill without this provision. Because if you make them do it later on, they're never going to strip this amendment. They're not going to unenrich themselves. That's never going to happen. So this is our only chance to right this wrong. And this is corruption. It is theft and broad daylight, and anyone voting against this amendment to strip this bill, this corrupt provision, is complicit in that corruption. So I urge you to support Amendment 23 and not aid and abet corruption. I yield back.
I'll delay my questioning. Mr. McGovern, you're recognized.
Well, first, I want to thank you all for being here at this hour, and I appreciate it. I support all your amendments, and I think people are tired of us saying that we can't fix problems. I mean, people want us to fix problems. They want us to clean up corruption. They want us to make sure people have health care. They want us to respect our veterans. They want the Epstein files released. And we, and what's happening around here is you got a lot of people who are trying to have the, do the double talk. Yeah, I know, I'm with you, but we can't do it because of this, or we can't do it because of that. I mean, and so then nothing ever gets done. And I just want to say one thing about, there's been a lot of kind of negative talk about the Affordable Care Act, but I do want to point out, I mean, look, I believe we need a very different healthcare system in this country. But I do want to point out some of the good things about the Affordable Care Act. Again, it's polling at 64% favorability. Donald Trump is at 37% favorability. But just so people understand, the Affordable Care Act stops health insurance companies from charging sick people more in premiums than healthy people. It keeps those same health insurance companies from denying coverage to pregnant women, people with pre-existing medical conditions, or because of a person's medical history. It prohibits the health insurance industry from setting an annual or lifetime limit. It demands insurance companies cover most preventative services. It gives states the flexibility to expand their Medicaid programs, which 40 states have done. It provides financial assistance to working people to make health coverage more affordable. And it allows young adults to stay on their parents' insurance plans until they're 26. And those are just some of the provisions within the ACA that make it, quite frankly, popular with a lot of people. I wish the ACA went further. Some of us went during the debate, fought for a public option. We got frustrated by some of our colleagues in the Senate. But I just want people to understand that's what the ACA does. And again, I don't think, I would like to think that none of them are controversial. I don't know why my Republican friends don't like those things, but let me just say also, in addition, the last time Democrats were in control, we built on the progress made with the ACA. We allowed Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices for the first time in history, saving both Medicare and the American people billions of dollars. Democrats capped the cost of insulin at $35 per month. We made signing up for health care coverage easier and more affordable. Democrats lowered premiums by an average of $800 per person per year. And over 4 years, nearly 12 million more Americans signed up for insurance on the ACA marketplace, bringing the total up to nearly 24 million in 2025. And so, I think my Republican colleagues have made this case as they've attacked us for these, for calling for the extension of the ACA, enhanced credits, is that we have always been a champion for providing additional assistance to help make health care more affordable for people. They have been on the other side. I want to thank them for reminding the American people that we're always on the side of trying to lower their costs and not reducing the quality of their care. And I just want to say one other thing, and I appreciate the chairwoman, getting animated over the fact that the Republicans were basically not around for 7 weeks. I mean, the Speaker of the House basically abolished the House of Representatives during a time when, quite frankly, people are frightened to death over losing their health care premiums. And it really bothers me that there's not much support. So if Republicans are going to screw people over, at least they should show up. And they haven't worked for 8 weeks, they should show up. I move to adjourn, Madam Chair. People ought to show up at the hearing on health care.
Has made a motion to adjourn. Question is on the motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No! In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Mr. McGovern is going to request a recorded vote.
Yeah, you
A recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mrs. Fishbach? No. Mrs. Fishbach, no. Mr. Norman? Mr. Roy? No. Mr. Roy, no. Mrs. Houchin? No. Mrs. Houchin, no. Mr. Langworthy? No. Mr. Langworthy, no. Mr. Scott? No. Mr. Scott, no. Mr. Griffith? No. Mr. Griffith, no. Mr. Jack? No. Mr. Jack, no. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Ms. Scanlon? Aye. Ms. Scanlon, aye. Mr. Neguse? Aye. Mr. Neguse, aye. Ms. Leger-Fernandez? Aye. Ms. Leger-Fernandez, aye. Madam Chair?
No.
Madam Chair, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 8 nays.
The motion is not agreed to.
Now everybody's here, good, okay. I yield back.
Does any member on the Republican side wish to ask a question of the panel? No. Ms. Scanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you, and I wanted to thank all the witnesses for coming in, particularly to talk about the stories of your constituents, because some of our colleagues don't seem to have heard from their constituents about the really drastic price increases that they are being subjected to. And thank you for the amendment with respect to funding the toxic substances with the PACT Act and addressing a whole variety of issues that we wish we were talking about and addressing at this juncture. So really appreciate the work that everyone's put into this and hope that all the amendments are made in order so we can get full and fair debate and votes. I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Scanlon. Mr. Ngush, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before my friend from Georgia steps out, my question to my colleague from Virginia here was going to be connected to something you had said previously, just in regards to this very problematic provision regarding the payout or payola, as my colleagues articulated. And I guess the question is, I appreciate the gentleman from Georgia's concerns and certainly echo those concerns and share his sentiments. And I think I want to understand, and perhaps I'll direct the question to Representative Wasserman Schultz, because I think she served the longest here on this particular panel. If we were to excise this particular provision from the bill, the Senate, I presume, could quickly hotline this bill, and the country could see what corrupt senator is willing to stand up and refuse unanimous consent to get this bill across. Is my understanding of archaic Senate procedure accurate?
Ms. Neguse, that is a correct understanding. It is Tuesday, and I feel quite certain, given how quickly the Senate seems to be able to pull their only 100 members back into session, and I will say, thankfully, remained in session for these last 8 weeks, unlike our colleagues who were on vacation. They seem ready, willing, and able to deal with the work necessary that was outside of the process of passing a CR, and certainly should be able to come back in, excise this grossly corrupt provision that will enrich and line the pockets of 8 senators, and breathtakingly, they have millions of dollars that they were willing and able to include in this bill to line the pockets and enrich senators, but they can't agree to advance fund vital healthcare funding to ensure that toxic, exposed, and poisoned veterans don't have a gap in our ability to keep that safety net underneath them. That shows you where their priorities are. If everyone is so concerned with reopening the government, which we all should be, they will get their tuchuses back to Washington, take that provision out, and pass. After we've taken it out, they can pass the bill and send it back to us.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
Send it to the president.
I certainly agree with the gentlelady from Florida, and I appreciate the gentleman from Virginia proposing this particular amendment. One final note, I guess I would say, Madam Chair, I, like everyone here in the committee room, noticed with great interest your reaction to Ms. Ansari's statement regarding House Republicans being on paid vacation for the last 54 days, and I understand that you took great umbrage at her suggestion or her statement in that regard. What I find fascinating is that none of your other Republican colleagues took any umbrage to her statement or to any other of those statements, similar statements made by my Democratic colleagues here. And of course, it's no surprise because they're not here. They're all in the back room, none of them. I mean, hence Mr. McGovern's motion to adjourn, to somehow find a way, after 8 weeks of Republicans just completely skipping town, that perhaps they might grace this committee with their presence to hear the testimony from their colleagues. So in any event, I'm certainly glad that the chairwoman is here and has an opportunity to defend the propriety of how she accorded her time during the course of this 54-day sojourn that Speaker Johnson sent the House on. But I wish my colleagues might perhaps join us so that they could defend themselves as well. But I digress. I'll keep waiting for that. Maybe there'll be another motion to adjourn in the offing here. Anyway, I yield back to the chairwoman.
Ms. Ledger Fernandez, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And it was sort of quite hilarious how they all rushed in here to vote. None of them came to work to actually sit through the committee. And in fact, most of them didn't even sit through the testimony of their own chairman of appropriations or through the ranking member. And, threw out speeches and then left. So there could be no dialogue. There could be no debate. And this is the only time that the House has to debate this bill. It feels like the Duma. It feels like the Duma. And you know what else it feels like? It feels like, back then when we were debating that big, beautiful bill that we all rushed back here to vote for. Because they wanted us to make sure that we voted before July 4th for their big, beautiful bill. They could move heaven and earth to make sure we got here. But they can't move heaven and earth to make sure we get tax credits for working families, to make sure that we eliminate this payola. Yes, I started calling it payola, and I looked up when I started calling it that. I was like, when I first read that, I said, we got to get rid of this. Because what is a payola? Is it a bribe? Like, what did these senators get in return? Like, what were they giving up? And we keep saying 8 senators. I'm going to say their names. We have 8 senators. Senators Graham, Johnson, Senator Blackburn, Senator Loomis, Senator Haggerty, Senator Hawley, Senator Sullivan, and Senator Tuberville. Let's say their names. Let's make sure the American people know who will get millions of dollars, because each violation will give you $500,000. And so they can claim violation. And when we say violation, that sounds like something went wrong. Let's make sure the American people know. These were subpoenas or inquiries by the FBI that were authorized by the courts, that were authorized by grand juries when they were looking into what happened around the January 6th insurrection. And the American people saw that this place was overrun by violent attackers. We were here. We were here. There were 140 law enforcement officers who went to the hospital. 140 police officers went to the hospital, and now we're going to pay senators, these 8 senators that I have called out, we're going to pay them millions of dollars instead of providing any money to the veterans, instead of providing any money to the children, to the families. It is outrageous, and it is horrible. And I also appreciate that you have sponsored a similar amendment, and I think there are going to be multiples of these because we all recognize how horrible they are, and Republicans recognize, but they think they have no power when they have power. How dare they? Representative Superman, why don't you say a little bit more about this concept that they can't do anything?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say there's 8 right now. There's been a couple others that have come forward and said, wait, what about my payout? And so they're actually going to, this might expand past 8, actually. But thank you for reading the names and calling this out. But yes, all we have to do is vote for one of these amendments that we're putting forward to strip this bill of this provision and take away this corrupt scheme by these Republican senators and send it back to the Senate. and put it on the floor for them to vote for. Are they going to continue the shutdown so that they can line their pockets with tens of millions of dollars potentially? That's really up to them. That's really up to them, right? And so let's make them take that vote. If you truly care, if you truly believe that this is corrupt, you will vote for this amendment and you will send this bill back to the Senate if you truly believe this is corrupt. If not, then you seem to not have a problem with this. This is your chance right now.
Right. And I want to thank you, Representative, for pointing out how much money has been wasted by President Trump. You forgot to mention his golf trips. Like, he just took one, $10 million. Like, the American taxpayers are paying $10 million every time he goes, decides to go and golf, when we paid for his trip to Scotland. And it's this kind of contrast that the American public is seeing. The American public is seeing that they're not willing to provide tax credits for working families and small businesses, and you all described powerfully what that means in your communities. But they're willing to let him send $40 billion to Argentina. They're willing to let him spend taxpayer dollars on his golf trips. And you want to say something, Ranking
I
Member?
wanted to talk a little about your payola issue. You know, I remember when Republicans raged against earmarks. I mean, some of us have been around here long enough. And I mean when we had bills that had provisions that helped the specific members' constituents. And we had some Republicans that would rage against them. And what we have here is an earmark on steroids. I mean, forget about the constituents. This money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, possibly millions of dollars, goes directly to specific Republican senators. And most Republicans are just going to say, oh, well, what can we do? We just have to move on. Trump is trying to get hundreds of millions from the Department of Justice. So now I guess we have some senators who want their cut. And my Republican friends just seem to be all okay with it. I mean, this is corrupt, and it is disgusting. And at some point, I mean, people have to be willing to stand up, develop a backbone, and say, no, we're not going along with this. I thank the gentlelady.
Yeah, it's about courage versus corruption. And what we are asking Republicans to do is to have the courage to vote against the corruption that's in this provision. We might disagree on, clearly, Madam Chairwoman, we disagree on the benefits of the Affordable Care Act. I've told you earlier, I think it's wonderful because I'm a cancer survivor and have pre-existing condition. I needed the Affordable Care Act. I love the fact that I could keep my kids. I'm also pretty much a single mom with regards to 3 kids, right, who are going to college now, getting their degrees, and I could keep them on the Affordable Care Act. You know, as my kid was working in service industry, you don't get enough money to get health care. I could keep him on my health insurance. So we might disagree about the benefits of the Affordable Care Act, but I'm hoping we don't disagree on the fact that we shouldn't be spending millions of taxpayer monies and sending it directly to 8, 10, 12 senators. And did you notice that? It only applies to the senators. Right? There were subpoenas, lawful subpoenas. Remember, these are lawful subpoenas, grand jury, court-approved subpoenas.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
would you yield just to?
I would love to
Thank
yield
you.
to.
I just want to make one other point on the appropriations process, because as the ranking member mentioned, years gone by, and the chairwoman and I were in Congress when actually some members of Congress went to prison for enriching themselves through the earmark process, which was why we lost earmarks, a big reason we lost earmarks for about a decade. But now, because we reformed that process, we actually each certify that we have no personal interest and no benefit comes to us from a community project funding request. And so I mean, we're that careful now because of past abuses. And this provision literally personally enriches at least 8 senators and allows millions of dollars with the inability of the government to even raise opposition or evidence or any counter to that to that process, and for 8 senators at least to be personally enriched. I can't even understand how some of our colleagues would stand in front of their constituents after going home and voting for this and with a straight face defend that vote. It's breathtaking.
Thank you, Representative Dexter.
Thank you
Our
so much.
pulmonologist, Dr. Dexter.
No, thank you so much. I just had a point of clarification. Did those 8 senators vote on this bill? Because it seems that they should have declared a conflict of interest and have exempted themselves from the bill.
I think they made sure that the provision made it into the bill and then voted for it. Thank you very much for bringing to the American people the issues about veterans care, about your individual constituents, about the priorities that Democrats are fighting for, and how Republicans are just spending all this taxpayer money on things that I don't think make a lot of sense. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Leisure Fernandez. You're excused as a panel. Thank you very much. Ms. Salinas, Mr. Vindman, Mr. Oshevsky, Ms. Stansberry, Mr. Horsford, Ms. Berrigan, and Mr. Raskin. If we can squeeze you in, we'll bring another chair.